So, Father in heaven, we come and we, as always, we come to thank you and think about even the topic today and of marriage and just relationships. We ask that you be with us and help us to be biblical for sure, and to have discernment, and also to learn, especially for those, again, whether married or not married. There's a lot to learn about relationships, or even knowledge, so that it can be shared with others. And so we ask for your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, let's see here.
Can I make an announcement before we get started?
Sure.
Prayer can be at my house Wednesday morning at 8:30, because it's easier for you guys to get to my house than it is for me to get to this house. But if you come to my house, you might even have treats. So
Treats. Ooh.
Yay.
That's good.
That's weird.
All right, letter number 18. We're making progress. People ask when we're going to be done.
Who cares?
That's a better answer.
yeah, I like that.
It's hard for me to say that, but in my
We should be in
response,
the
but
Word for our entire life.
we have there's 31 letters, so you know, do the math. It's about 13 times 2 weeks. It's 26 weeks. So that leads us to next summer sometime, or this summer. So it's good, but all the topics are varied, so it's not like hopefully we don't get bored, because they're all interesting, various topics. But so today, on your handout, you can look at that later if this is the first time you've seen it. But nature, role, love, physical intimacy, oneness in marriage, feelings of being loved. One of the things that we've been discussing is that C.S. Lewis, you know, he wrote these in 1941. So he was not married, but at this time. However, he wasn't necessarily some prude either. So in his pre-Christian life, he definitely had opportunities to be with women, and he took advantage of that. And so what he's describing in a lot of this is his experiences and his observations. Because remember, most of what we see in Screwtape is his observations about life and different things. And so, any initial thoughts you guys have who read this? Anybody want to share? Sandy, what were you saying? You said something about this when you walked in. That you found it interesting, or?
This was an interesting letter for me because I've kind of lived several of the different stages of this sort of thing in my life, and right now I've been single for a really long time, and without being married, according to the Bible, I mean, that's it for me as far as a physical relationship. And so that's something that I need to get used to and be content with, and so far I am. Doesn't seem to be a problem. Like I said, I've been through a lot of the other ones and discarded them because they weren't healthy. And they weren't biblical, they weren't healthy, and I'm at this stage now, and I'm much happier at this stage than I ever was at any of the other stages.
So, today in our culture, which again, this was 40s England.
Did you say 1941 or 31?
41. 41. So, in our culture today, because we're pretty removed from this, what's the basis for marriage?
In love.
Being in love.
Being
The
in
feeling.
love.
Being in love, yeah.
The tingles.
The tingles, the
Tingles,
fluttering
yeah.
of the stomach, right, or whatever.
I see it more as an advance. Is this going to help me in my agenda?
Okay.
That's a good one. I think so,
Yeah. And what else? I mean,
Well, it's gonna
well,
help me be happy.
I try to think of, you have somebody now that the marriage age is continuing to get later and later, right? I mean, now I think it's like 29 or 28 for men. Men are usually a little bit later, but so you think about the secular mindset. What causes them to say, hey, you know what? I want to marry you. It could be the emotion for sure.
Material.
What do you mean?
Like stability.
Stability?
Things like that,
Maybe.
necessity.
Yeah, bringing two incomes together. That kind of goes with the agenda. How
You
can
know,
this-
I've thought about that watching golf, because golfers have a tendency to marry and have children young, the pro golfers. And I'm thinking because it does stabilize their relationships, so they don't have to worry about that while they're out on the golf course. They can focus on their no, seriously, when you think about it.
Let me see if I can get that in here soon.
If they're a pro, they can afford it.
Well, yeah,
That's
but,
the other
but,
thing too.
but even the ones that
Yeah.
are,
I guess, there's a financial incentive, and what you see now is kind
It's
of
a
in the switch.
stabilization,
It is
huh?
a stabilization, where a lot of the men like the six figures, okay, of the woman. It's kind of turned in that sense. There's a lot of stay-at-home dads now, whatever that looks like. Also, what about you think of a man, there's two different realms, we're going to get into it here in a second, but why would the man at 28 want to get married?
Have kids.
To have kids? Is that really a driving force, you think?
Sometimes.
No,
No?
it's a liability now. It's not an asset.
Well, that-
You wanted to have
It
kids
used to be
100
then.
years ago.
It used to be,
because
yeah.
they
It used
work
to
in the
be.
field for you.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking now.
To perpetuate your.
So I guess we'll ask the men instead
Look
of
at
asking the
college
women.
education
So,
costs.
because I'm going to ask the women about, what they're, but why would you want to be married? Taylor, you're young. Young.
You can tell him.
Thought about it, so.
That's
ask him
good.
if he wants to get married.
Yeah.
You'd be tired of the dating game? Or?
Tired of the dating game? Yeah. It's not that do companionship. I think that's a huge thing.
That's, loneliness.
Yeah.
To combat loneliness.
I mean, do men is the primary number one? You think, again, in a secular perspective, do men marry for love?
Happiness.
Happiness.
Yeah.
And that's a fleeting deal. They don't understand that there'll be some unhappy moments.
But I have a buddy of mine that's he wants to get married, but he's like, man, I want a woman that'll go to the college games with me, that'll go watch this, and so we can go do things together. He's looking at it from a companionship perspective. Of course, if there's sex in there, then why not? That's an extra bonus. But for him, it's companionship. Now, what about young women? 25-year-old woman. What's her motive?
Security.
Security, yeah, big time.
Security. What else?
Not anymore, honestly.
Depends, yeah.
It depends on the woman.
Sometimes they have great jobs.
It depends on where and who you're raised by, what.
Don't think Christian here. Don't think any of that.
No,
We have those.
no.
But,
They still like the idea of being in love and living
Yeah.
happily ever after.
I think so.
Biological clock.
Could be family, so there's an inclusion there. Security's probably getting lower. Not that it's not there, but it's getting lower on that. And so we take all these modern ideas of why.
Well, there's one more too.
Go ahead.
Is that a lot of people find their worth in other people's acceptance, and I think that plays both for men and women. And so it can be like I'm validated that this person actually wants to spend, be married to me as well, and that's a beautiful thing on one end because it is. But if you're using that to get your validation, it is fleeting, like you said, with happiness. And so I see that in a lot of people that have low.
Self-esteem.
Well, and
Yeah.
also I hate that word, but they don't get their validation from God.
Or they
And
have
so-
never gotten it from a family before.
Yes.
They have a very dysfunctional family. And, somebody loves me.
Yeah.
See, it's good that this is going that direction because that's the direction I wanted to go in the sense of, without a biblical background, because we're going to see it right in the beginning, but without a biblical background, they could be completely secular atheists, they're not knowing anything about God or the Bible or what God expects of marriage. Why marriage? Who cares? Why not just live together? I still find that puzzling. That marriage still, it's slowly declining in the sense of the need, But why, if we're living together, why the formality of a piece of paper?
It's not a guarantee to just live together. Marriage is supposed to be the guarantee.
So we still have this subtle in the thinking, but even there though, I agree with you, but I think even that's fading because marriage is so easy to get rid of. It's like, oh, well, if it doesn't work, we can get divorced.
Now
There's
it
still
is,
legal
yeah.
commitments. I found that out.
Well, fair enough. Okay, but I'm talking about what motivates them to say, oh, well, hey, we don't need a piece of paper. We're together. what motivates them to actually go through the process, if even a secular marriage, go to the justice of the peace? What is the thinking behind that?
Maybe other people, like their
Another
family.
authority,
So you have authority.
another authority more than just I do and I do.
You think that they're longing for another authority, or do you think maybe that's an extra validation?
Basically, logically, you can argue without any Christianity, without God, you can logically argue the high ground for marriage and the contract, and then defining purpose. You know, especially if you have kids that come into the relationship, and how this is better for the kids. So you can make a logical argument to why the contract. makes good
idea.
sense.
You know, because years ago, way back, it used to be a contract. And it was a contract between families. You brought two families together. You brought two.
And it still is that way in many other cultures.
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah. It's kind of gotten away from that a lot, but it used to be that two families would put two people together, whether they knew each other or not, and marry them, and that was a written business contract.
So, yeah, agreed. And so I'll reach kind of, at least the way I think it, I'll speculate a little bit. Thinking about what you two said, in that you're in this relationship, and maybe you're tired of the dating game, and something about marriage has within it exclusivity, right? That, well, if you marry me, I'll feel special, because I'll feel like the only one. You know, I'll feel like the special one to you versus, well, you're just cohabitating with me, big deal. And so on both sides, there's another aspect of, well, again, marriage says, well, this won't necessarily end as quickly as tomorrow. There's a little bit more longevity of expectation on it, even though they know they can get out any time. But it begins to put two people together in a special way, right? So I imagine the emotional side of it as well. He chose me over somebody else. There might be the, pardon?
Validation.
The validation part of it. And so I think all of us, when you're in a dating relationship or whatever, you don't want to be just one of many, right? By definition, love is exclusive. And so by going down that road, having that extra layer of formality helps you at least feel, you might not be that special, but it does provide a certain level. And I think love by nature wants to be special, right? I mean, how many of us, in one ways, want to feel like we're God's favorites? I mean, I think we
all do.
we'd want to. And God says, yeah, you're all my favorites. You know, he all has a special way. So anyways, it's just interesting what he's going to get to here. Of course, he's operating from a biblical perspective. And Screwtape's going to come in and throw that out the window. But he's also going to recognize some patterns here, which I think now are no longer applicable. You know, because our culture's not biblical. They don't care what God says, for the most part. So let's jump in. He says here, even under Slubgob.
I love that name. That is just so bad.
And remember, this is another one of the tempters. Remember, the names don't mean anything, honestly. He just, when C.S. Lewis, he answered that in his second preface. Hey, what do the names mean? He said, I just put funny names together. So there's nothing deep. Even under Slubgob, you must have learned at the college the routine technique of sexual temptation. And since for us spirits, this whole subject is one of considerable tedium, though necessary as part of our training, I will pass it over. But on the larger issues involved, I think you have a good deal to learn. Okay, so I just have a couple of questions there. Why does Screwtape describe the art of sexual temptation as tedious to spirits? And how does this relate to the source of our temptations? So, you want to read, Jerry, you want to read Romans 8? We can skip Romans 7 for now, but Romans 8, 10 through 14. Well, what would we say here? Why is it tedious to Screwtape?
No creativity for them.
Okay, no
It's
creativity.
always the same thing.
Okay.
You know, it's the same temptation over and over and over.
Yeah, I think so. What else? Why is it tedious to him?
Not sexually.
According to what C.S. Lewis is saying is, Screwtape says, well, we're spirits. We don't have any sexual temptations or risks. Which, that brings up a whole bunch of other questions about, the difference between We talked about this last week in our men's Bible study, but the difference between fallen angels and spirit beings, like demonic spirits, where fallen angels, according to Genesis 6, they have the ability to mate. They're just commanded not to. And when you read Genesis 6, they came down and they chose human women and caused a whole bunch of trouble. Okay? And that's a whole different story. But what you also have, though, is you have these demonic spirits that you see in the Old Testament, but primarily in the Gospels, where they are these disembodied spirits that are looking to be embodied. And they have tremendous lusts, and they have tremendous insatiable desires. So part of this here, I would say, I think C.S. Lewis is, again, he's not a theologian, so he's lacking some of this theological precision as it relates, but nevertheless, and if we speak about it just going from the text, or from what he's saying, is they don't have physical bodies. So he's saying, well, we don't care about that, because we can't be tempted through food, we can't be tempted through physical lusts, because we don't have a physical body. That's what he's ultimately saying here. And so, but nevertheless, Romans 8, you want to read that?
Sure. But if Christ is in you, then even though your body is subject to death because of sin, the Spirit gives life because of righteousness. And if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give you life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation, but not to the flesh, to live according to it. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of your body, you will live. To 14?
Yeah, 14.
For those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God.
So, what do we get here from this? Is all sort of, we talked about this even last week at the end of the letter, and he's kind of, you can tell as he's writing them every week, and he's got these thoughts that are still flowing of what he brought in last time. In that, last time we saw in 17 that temptation, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, appeals to us through our flesh, through this physical body, right? I have the Romans 7, where Paul's going, well, the things that I want to do, I don't do. The things that I do want to do, I don't accomplish those either. And so he says, who will deliver me from this body of death? And so right now, our natures are new. We have a new heart, a new creation. It's dwelling in this still unredeemed physical body. Now, there's coming a time when we will get a new body and all those remnants, because he talks about our members being instruments of sin. We're going to get a new body that has no sin in it, and our new nature, our spirits, if you want to talk about spirit being, is going to be implanted into that new physical body that God is preparing in heaven for us. You see that in 2 Corinthians 5. We won't have to worry about it. But now, we have all these good desires, but we're trapped in here. And he says, man, who's going to deliver me, from this body of death? Thank God, Jesus Christ delivers us. But here, what Paul now is saying in Romans 8 is, even though we're trapped here, we don't have to be controlled by it, because we have the Spirit. We have, not only are we have a new nature, we're slaves of righteousness, but we have the Holy Spirit indwelling in us. Therefore, there's no excuse, even though I imagine that now that we are sensitive to sin, it's hard. Because remember we talked about not just food, but lust of the eyes, the pride of life. All those are sensual temptations. So, we'll get to this other question later, but let's go into paragraph 2. So, main thing here, he says it's a tedium for us. This is this physical thing. We don't have to deal with that physical stuff. I'm going to pass it over, but on the larger issues, I'm going to teach you some things. So, paragraph 2, he says the enemy's demand on humans takes the form of a dilemma. Either complete abstinence or unmitigated monogamy. Okay, 2 things, right? So this is the dilemma. Either you stay abstinent, you stay sexually pure, or you get married and it's unmitigated monogamy, okay? Ever since our Father's first great victory, we have rendered the former, complete abstinence, very difficult to them. The latter, monogamy, for the last few centuries, we have been closing as a way of escape. We have done this through the poets and the novelists by persuading the humans that a curious and usually short-lived experience, which they call being in love, is the only respectable ground for marriage. That marriage can, and ought or should render this excitement permanent, and that a marriage which does not do so is no longer binding. This idea is our parody of an idea that came from the enemy. What's a parody?
Parody is a,
I think
Making a
Weird Al
joke.
Yankovic. Remember him?
yeah,
He sang parodies, which were mimicking something, but exaggerating it. And that's kind of what I put on here.
and
is-
making
was
fun of it.
making
kind
fun of it.
Yeah.
So what Screwtape is saying is, what we've been trying to do is to mimic God's instructions by exaggerating things. Okay, so remember that. That's the flavor. So, question 2, how does our Father's first great victory affect the dilemma in which humans find themselves? We won't read Genesis 3 specifically, but you want to read 1 Corinthians 7, Jerry, in a second, and then Hebrews 13:4. I can share that one. But what's the Father's first victory? Who's the Father here? Satan.
Satan.
So what's he talking about?
Temptation in the garden.
Okay,
Autonomy for the couple.
autonomy. So the first victory was the fall, right? So once sin entered, that's really what he's saying is, once sin entered the picture, and we ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, now we have a lot of problems, okay? And now sin has corrupted everything. And so what's the challenge now? Where maybe prior to that, prior to sinning, we had the ability not to sin, right? They could have lived for a long time and never sinned. We don't know how long it was. Nevertheless, sin came. And now we're all bound to it. We all have sin natures. We all have fleshly desires that crave to be satisfied. So you can see how when sin entered the picture and gave us all a sin nature, this dilemma has become magnified.
Separation.
Meaning?
Well, for one, it was instituted as the two should be one. So what came to sin, not only did we were separated from God, but we were also separated from our partner.
Yeah.
So it's Adam separated from Eve. So there's that natural longing to come back to that joining. And so the avenue that's being used is the sexual
Yeah.
avenue, as opposed to all of it together, spiritual.
Yep. And whenever what is sin by definition? What does sin want?
Separation from God.
Okay.
Control.
Control, autonomy.
Yeah.
Sin wants whatever it wants, right? It's selfish.
Right.
So we don't have to get too fancy. Sin is just selfish. It's like, sin wants what I want, when I want it, at anybody else's expense. I don't care. So it's a very inward thing. And so as soon as, you have God, the two becoming one flesh, Genesis 2:24, prior to Genesis 3 when sin enters. So you imagine how they were loving each other and, looking out for each other and naturally being selfless. Then sin enters, and now it's all about autonomy. It's all about, desiring what you want when you want it.
The me generation.
The me generation. And it's kind of what we saw again in letter 17, the all I want, my needs, my desires, etc. So, let's see. So, 1 Corinthians 7, this is a great passage. You got it?
Yep. But since sexual immortality is occurring, each man should have sexual relationship with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. I say this as a concession, not as a command. I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another that. Now, to the unmarried and the widows, I say it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. But if you cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better for them to marry than to burn with passion.
Okay. So this is, this phrase, better to marry than to burn with passion. That's the context here. And this is a very clear theological section where, hey, if you can't control yourself, or you don't want to, your only option is to go get married. That's it. Nothing else. And so, and then when
that's not going to necessarily solve your problem.
No.
If you have no self-control.
Well, fair enough.
But it will help a lot.
well, yeah, but
I will say this, that, in I would say a considerable amount of the marital conversations that I have, that primarily, this is an interesting congregation because you guys are a little bit older, wiser, but when I was in Illinois, everybody's young. And so oftentimes the couples would come in and, a man or a woman, she won't have sex with me enough. It's causing me a lot of problem. I'm being drawn to porn because she won't be with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So when we start here, 1 Corinthians 7, and we start saying, well, okay, this is what God's telling you, this is what God's telling you. But it's interesting that this is a real issue. It is a real issue. And then when temptation comes in, Screwtape is saying, hey, this is the dilemma. And once sin comes in, when you have sin is inward oriented, and then you start talking, well, how much is enough? They have different opinions. One's 7 days, one's every 3 weeks. It's like, oh, how do we come to some negotiating settlement on this? And it's real life. And here, he's making this comment. This is the trouble. In Hebrews 13:4 it says marriage is honorable among all, but fornicators, what's a fornicator?
Sex outside marriage.
Sex outside of marriage. Fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. I mean, that's pretty clear. So he's right in what he's saying is that there's this dilemma of either complete abstinence or you get married, and with one person, your spouse.
and it doesn't necessarily mean this is all on the man. Because there are women that are
Agreed.
saying,
That's why I say I can give you my
same
own,
boat.
unprofessional or unscientific statistics, but there has been several times where the man wasn't interested, and the wife was more, and it goes back and forth. So I just asked this dilemma that the humanity, this is all of humanity, finds ourselves. Have we seen this? Well. Doesn't take long in our culture, right? Is there any sort of does the culture embrace this dilemma?
No.
Not even close, right? They don't care. I mean, there's no there's no religious even biblical mindset anymore. And I find it interesting that like Sarah, my daughter, she's 17. She'll tell me everything, right? Everything she has with her friends, and several of the friends are like, well, I think I'm going to have sex with so-and-so. She's like, what? And she goes, well, you guys aren't even dating. She goes, yeah, but I think he wants to. He's a friend and kind of a friend with benefits. And she's like, don't you? And so she's asking me, Dad, what do I say? And I said, well, you can't talk Bible to them. I mean, you can, but they don't care. And I said, try to talk to her about her own value, her own worth. Does she even care about her own purity? Does it have any meaning for her? And in reality, no. I was like, wow. And so you wonder how does our culture get there where this, your purity, for a man or a woman, doesn't matter, have no value. And that's where Screwtape is loving it. Because number one, they don't even know about the dilemma. They don't know that God expects them to wait. And so they're willing to give it free to them. And the guy was a complete jerk. It wasn't if he was some romantic guy. He was just a complete jerk. But So you think, you go, oh wow, and this is where it is. So sad. And of course, then we start talking about what about the emotional drawbacks from it, because she thinks it's not going to be there's no emotion attached. Well, we know different, and he'll talk about that here.
And what if she gets pregnant for heaven's
Well, that's
sake?
the other thing, yeah?
Yeah.
So, there's all these, so I was trying to talk to her about it in the sense of, speak to her selfishly. Well, do you want an STD? I mean, because this guy, he's getting around with everybody, so you're nothing special. Because in her mind, she was thinking, well, for that moment, she would feel special.
Oh.
By this guy. And I said, communicate. He doesn't care about you at all. At all. And as long as you give it up, he'll be interested, but maybe not even that very long, because he'll find somebody else that is maybe different or whatever. So it's just interesting. But for her, even though she didn't want to admit it, there was this subtle hope that it would draw him in to making her be the one and only for him.
It's called backwards.
One of the new kind of progressive liberal voices in our culture from feminism is saying that purity and abstinence is it's a male dominated thing. It's the the duplicity of men can go out and sow their seeds, but women need to be pure. So they look at it as an oppressive, chauvinistic thing. And even in the liberal churches, there's a woman pastor from the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, who asked all of the purity rings. Remember the True Love Waits things? She wanted women to send purity rings in. And I think I already said this one before, I don't even say it again. But anyway, so it's just wicked that women are told this, that purity is an oppressive chauvinist idea.
And biblically,
It's horrible.
shouldn't the men have purity rings too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally, yeah.
But that's the lie, right? Is that they frame it, this straw man, that it's an oppressive thing for men on the women, and that it's okay for men to go. And you do see, I mean, historically, there has been a double standard for sure.
Didn't they used to put these, metal chastity
Yeah.
things?
But it was only for women.
It's only what?
It's only for women.
It was only
Oh,
for
I
women.
know, I
They
know.
didn't have one for males.
Again, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
They're
but
right
women
to
didn't
call
have
out
any
the
standing.
double standard. But that what they try to say is that's from a chauvinistic or biblical thing or patriarchal thing.
Patriarchal.
In reality, that's not what the Bible says. Here it's putting the responsibilities for on men and women, but again, that's easily left out. So let's see here. Question 3, what are the 3 aspects of the strategy that Screwtape has been using to close the way of escape through unmitigated monogamy? So, what does he say there?
There's no way around it. Unmitigated is there's no escape from it.
Okay.
That's
No
it.
negotiation.
Say again?
No negotiation. There's not a way to
Yeah.
negotiate around it.
So, I'll read to you.
One of the ways is the definition of falling in love.
Yes. So, he says here
Being in love.
that being in love is the only respectable ground for marriage. So, this feeling, this emotion, is the only reason you should get married. Secondly, that marriage, if you get married, is going to make that feeling permanent. Okay? And then, number 3 is, well, if it doesn't stay permanent, it must mean that you married the wrong one, and therefore your marriage is no longer binding. So those are the 3 things that what they've been promoting in order to close off. What he means by, what is it? Well, I guess I can ask it, but when he says we've been closing as a way of escape, what he's saying there in a roundabout way is we've been minimizing marriage as being a positive option, as being favorable. So that, again, this dilemma is, well, hey, if I'm feeling, I can't control myself, I need to get married, and what they're trying to say is, well, but hey, but remember, The only way that you should get married is if you are in love, right? And so he's trying to keep people from being married because he knows if you do get married, so sex inside there is fine, but he wants us to sin. So he's trying to make marriage undesirable.
I think in here there's a great clue as to one of the major tools the devil uses against us. Changes the definition of words. Now God is the word. It's just like saying to use something that God has created against his own people, God's own people, and change the definition. The definition of marriage is one of them, so that they've changed toleration and everything else to use against us.
And the definition is love.
Agreed.
And
It's-
you know,
Go ahead. Okay.
no, I was just gonna say the word unmitigated or mitigated is kind of a negative word anyway. I kind of look at it as unmitigated is like, I don't know, it has to me it has a negative connotation.
So,
Permanent.
Huh?
It's permanent. There's no
No way around it.
no wiggle room in there.
Right.
so as we step back and get a kind of broad picture here in the sense of him describing, again, their goal is only get married if you feel in love. If you lose it, then I guess, you know, I've had several people come and say, well, you know, I don't love him anymore. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they go, well, you know, when we first started together, you know, they talk about this euphoric feeling of being in love, and therefore now that it's not, they think, I think I married the wrong person. And so the middle one there, number 2, is, well, did you really think that this feeling was going to last forever? I mean, what is the, you know...
And they lived happily ever after.
Right.
Promulgated forever.
Yeah. And you know, I would not want to live that way forever. Think about what you're feeling when you're sitting up there on cloud. Your heart's beating fast and you're not comfortable. You know,
Pretty nice.
You're not thinking of that, not feeling
I don't
comfortable.
know, it's not a bad feeling.
well, it's not bad, but
Well-
I wouldn't want to live that way for my whole life.
So, it's interesting you say that, because
Can't live in a
he talks
What?
about
the
this.
session stage. Yeah, you just
Yeah,
can't live
it's
in.
the first part is you got the tingles and you're obsessed with that person, and all you can do is think about them daily.
Yeah.
You know, Mona, I was going to tell you that when Mona and I got married, so we got married and we had after the first 2 weeks, I thought, this is marriage. How much fun is this? You know, I cook, I clean, I take care of all his needs, and
Or I had to share my closet space.
yeah.
Oh,
So what is this all about? You know, so then, you know, we went through, it took us about 10 years to get through the 7-year itch. And so meanwhile, we, you know, got a lot of counseling and different things along the way, but so it went from the obsessive part of the tingles in love to now 40 years later he is my helpmate. He's my friend. He helps me in
Yeah.
life. He helps me get through life. You know, and that's where it is. That's what love, so it's a commitment, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well,
Love is a
And that's what
commitment.
going to the ball games are all about, and that's what, you know,
Yes,
going out and duck
companionship.
hunting or
So,
pheasant
He
hunting.
didn't take
Oh,
me fishing. He didn't
well,
take me fishing.
let's talk about this for a second, because
I did all that, you
He didn't
know?
take me
Or
fishing.
going shopping.
the question, how do we observe this through our poets, novelists, and media? Somebody referenced every fairy tale is they lived happily ever after, right? And in raising daughters, you know, naturally, you know, when they're young, they're princesses, they're dressing up, and you know, and trying to help them to see the reality of beyond this initial period, because you know, psychologists say, oh, you know, this feeling of being loved could last 6 months or to 18 months, 2 years, who knows? But all of them universally that this is short-lived in comparison to a lifetime. Okay, so trying to get them to think in terms beyond that, where the reality is you do have 2 independent, autonomous people becoming one. And there's a lot there in the sense of sharing closet space or sharing each other and having expectations on each other. And I mean, you could see it even if roommates, as an example, living in the same context or space, it creates challenges. And then when you bring all the other factors of two people, including, again, there's intimacy of all kinds there. So he wrote a couple things other than this, and I want to share them with you. He says, this was to a woman prior to him writing the Screwtape letter in 1940. He says, the modern tradition is that the proper reason for marrying is the state described as being in love. Now, I have nothing to say against being in love, but the idea that this is or ought to be the exclusive reason, or that it can be itself an adequate basis, seems to me simply moonshine. Okay? In the first place, many ages, many cultures, and many individuals don't experience it, being in love. And Christianity is for all humanity, not simply for modern Western Europeans. Secondly, being in love, it often unites most unsuitable people. Thirdly, is it not usually transitory? Doesn't the modern emphasis on love lead people either into divorce or into misery because when that emotion dies down, they conclude that their marriage is a failure, though in fact they have just reached the point at which real marriage begins? Fourthly, it would be undesirable, if it were possible, for people to be in love all their lives. What a world it would be if most of the people we met were perpetually in this trance. Okay, so he's writing this prior to this letter, and you can see some of his thoughts. He says again in a different one, he says, this is in Mere Christianity, our experience is colored through and through by books and plays and cinema, and it takes patience and skill to disentangle the things we have really learned from life for ourselves. People get from books the idea that if you have married the right person, you may expect to go on being in love forever. As a result, when they find that they are not, they think this proves that they have made a mistake and are entitled to a change, not realizing that when they have changed, the glamour will presently go out of the new love, just as it went out of the old one. So here's another little snippet, a letter. He says, the trouble arises when poets and others set up this thing of being in love, good in certain conditions with its own proper degrees of goodness as an absolute, which many do. An innocent and well-intentioned emphasis on the importance of being in love with one's spouse, in other words, its superiority over lust or ambition as a basis for marriage, is in fact wisely twisted into the doctrine that only being in love sanctifies marriage, and that therefore as soon as you are tired of your spouse, you get a divorce. Thus, the overpraising of a finite good, the pretense that it is absolute, defeats itself and corrupts the very good it set out to exalt. Treat love as a god, and in fact you make it a fiend or a devil. So when we think about what he's saying here, does this idea still perpetuate in our modern culture?
Absolutely.
More so.
How so?
Think about how it's in your face now. I mean, he talks about the novels and the authors and the poets of the time. Now it's the media. Now everything's in your face to drive the lust issue. Hollywood,
For
yeah,
sure.
Exactly. It's absolutely amazing.
But I think it has been separated into recreational sex.
Well, yeah.
Like Sarah's friend, it's been separated where we're just going to do this as an activity and just something, a feel-good pastime, and that's definitely amplified since C.S. Lewis. I mean that part.
Well, that
they
didn't
don't even
just
say the
happen.
word love. It's not. I'm not even going to make love. We're just going to have sex.
That didn't just happen. Anybody here that worked in the casinos in the 70s and 80s and the 60s can tell you that happened a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, it definitely happened in the free love movement or whatever the 60s.
Well, I
Age
find
of Aquarius.
I find it too fascinating, just in discussions that I find in my conversations with a lot of people, that the idea of, well, I'll give you an example, like talking to my daughters who are they're very involved in social media, right? So trying to help them to learn to discern, just different things. And Sarah, she's the most talkative. She'd be like, hey, look at this. And I'll be like, so I'll give you an example. She said something about some new justice that Trump was recommending. And so supposedly she said some comment about some woman being raped. And so this is kind of a sidetrack, but anyways, the woman supposedly said back in the 70s, there was a woman who got raped and said, well, she was drunk, and she put herself in the position to be taken advantage by the man because she got drunk. And so they had this little quote, and so now everybody's on hype about this Supreme Court replacement district court person, and I said, well, did you get the context of that? And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, they just gave you this. And so she looked up, and she's looking at me, she's like, well, we'll see. So she went and looked up the context, and prior to this, in her statement, she said, all rapists should be completely prosecuted to the full extent of the law, but the other question that needs to be asked is, did she put herself in this position? You know, and so they left out her balanced thing, and I said, Sarah, and she's like, well, I guess I should have researched that, because she was getting all worked up. So in the same sense, I said, do a little research. They're just providing you this soundbite. And so what I find interesting is that, you know, we were talking about sex and stuff, and so I made the comment, I said, well, you know, that really should be talked about in the phrase of when a married couple's together that they're making love. And she's like, oh, Dad, that just disgusts me when you say that. And I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, can we just call it sex? And it was interesting that for her, this idea of a couple making love, that just that phrase was enough to cause her to, it wasn't blushing, it was vitriol, she did not like that phrase. She said, I'm trying to think of the exact, she said, that just sounds,
Cringy.
She was cringing on it. But it was okay to call it sex. So it was interesting seeing her. You say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say that I've talked to some young women or some young people that said, I can't imagine my parents doing it. You know? So that kind of thing too. Oh.
No, but that wasn't that. It was for her, like she said, oh, I'm never, with my husband, I'm never going to.
Has she ever been in love? Has she ever, even in puppy love or anything like that? Because she's not associating that with.
But I found it interesting. Where is she getting that repulsion?
Cliche.
That
it's become like super cliche to like to I don't know. It's just like the whole family and the couple in general and like traditional values and like males and females become so polarized in this day and age that those types of things have become cringy, like nerdy, cringy, just weird to say.
So is there a danger, even let's say in our lives?
There is a solution.
Is there a danger in even between married couples? What is the danger of saying, well, hey, you know what? Let's have sex versus let's go make love or share love or whatever. Is there danger in just calling it sex?
Yeah.
Sure.
You're
it takes
devaluing
the relationship out. And I think that's once again where it turned into a recreational activity. And people, and even, you know, scientists have shown that, you know, however many people you sleep with, that's how many people are in the bed with you type thing. There is an actually physiological change to a being, and God promises that through the relationship of being one, made one in the sight of the Lord. And that's what's been really discarded, is the relationship commitment is totally disregarded. And what's amazing is they're watching our culture. I mean, when have you ever seen a movie show married people having sex? As a love scene. Right. Watching these love scenes. But the point is,
it's always fornication or adultery or something.
It's always adultery, it's always fornication. They never lift that up. And so the cringeability is the fact that it's so foreign to think that a married couple has sex. It's just it's not seen.
It's like taboo almost.
Well, I think you said it well, that you're taking the relationship out of it, and then it becomes even an activity between husband and wife, versus what he's describing here, what the Bible describes of it's physical intimacy. It's the two becoming one in a physical sense. You always have the emotional and the spiritual and even the social aspect, but now you have this other very deep and intimate activity, which is the ultimate of two people becoming one. And you would hope that it's not just physical going on at that moment, that there's some connection going on there. But it's interesting, even in the phrases that now we have, and I found it interesting that for her, again, a lot of her thinking comes from social media, that the aversion, that she was so repulsed by that phrase. Where in the world is this coming from?
I think, you know, it's almost gone back to, remember the TV programs back in the, I don't know, 50s or 60s, when even married couples had to have twin beds.
Yes.
Yeah, Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, the Dick Van Dyke,
I love
yeah,
I
yeah.
love Lucy.
Yeah, but
They
that
had-
was the time when Christian sanctions or Christian censorship, and
Wasn't
basically
even just
Christianity
Christian.
had a grip on a
was
culture where
Right,
they
right.
told us
Morality.
Yeah, but
No.
nobody slept in a double bed.
But the thing is, this is purposeful.
Yeah,
I
think
mean,
so.
you've got this Screwtape thing, but it's purposeful. It's to desensitize people, and it's to get people's mind off of virtue and purity, things that used to be held in high esteem, and to make it everyday, mundane, just physical, and it's pretty, you know, communistic and a promotion of you're just a utilitarian being, and so it's actually very sad because
Yep.
you're made to be clean vessels, honorable vessels for the use of your Lord. And we are made in His image, and these things are disappearing. They're not being taught in Sunday school and church, and the emphasis is off our love of God, and the love comes from God.
To defend Sarah a little bit here, you know, I'm sure she's been taught about chastity and holding back. Sure. First, her oldest sister waiting till marriage for love. You'd think that maybe she's trying to keep her thoughts going controlled, not towards thinking about sex, but trying to keep more about chastity. In other words, you know, why start thinking about that? It's going to make you go off that route.
That was
That would be another reason why
You know,
she found
You'd be
out.
giving her the benefit of the doubt, which is, it's fine. One of the things that, you know, Emily's far more bashful about all things than Sarah is, but, and that's just her personality, but as we're trying to raise them, I guess I'll raise kids too, but trying to say, hey, look, whoa, you know, physical intimacy, you know, is not bad. We're just telling you to hold off and wait to experience the joys and the greatness of all that, and it's a gift in the context of marriage. So what we've been trying to do, because all of a sudden they'd be like, oh, and it's like, hey, don't associate that with something negative. Trying to combat that at all times, but simply by saying, just hold, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And now Allie, of course, she's
I was
married
going
now.
to say, hasn't she talked to her
Yes,
sister?
and Allie's looking at him going, oh man, you guys have no idea, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's too much TMI, but in the sense of trying to get them to not feel so negative. She's like,
Right.
oh no, it's not
She's
negative
got
at
the
all.
perfect example
She
right
does, yep.
there.
So that's what's working on Jeff.
But you know, one of the things I think we're all missing here, not one of us had sex education in the 5th grade. And it's not called love education.
No.
You teach it. My wife hated teaching that class. And so it was, think about it, the 5th grade.
Fifth grade.
Yeah.
It's
It's
second.
required.
And it's
The
never,
parent signs it out.
and it's more done in a context of protection and safety and the risks.
Yeah.
You know, pregnancy.
STs,
Yeah,
pregnancies.
Angela too.
But
when she teaches.
it's knowledge. It's like from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It opens up their minds. When we were younger, we didn't understand these things. We weren't exposed to them. Now there's no respect of children. They're exposed to everything. And earlier and earlier age, they're getting involved in things, and they're being taught just to supposedly protect themselves. What about their emotions?
Yeah, that's
What
it.
about-
This is
Yeah,
what
they're not
woman-
talking about their
she
emotions.
She didn't have any context of, well, what about the emotional fallout? Because I'm going to feel connected to this guy. I'm just going to give it up. And I think what you said is so right, that the sex is just an activity. It's just a recreational thing. And then you take that even into the church or married couples. They're thinking, hey, you know what? Let's go hiking, and then after hiking we can have sex, and then let's watch a movie. You're like, well, isn't that? I mean, it's one of those things. It's just one of those things that you just do instead of potentially, anyway, of seeing it as something that's a little bit more spiritually minded than just.
I think
You
because
know
it's
what
not.
this is taking us up to, and I don't know if this is going to be a part of, if this is leading towards, when you say you're in love with somebody, what happens after this point is you love this person.
Actively.
actively love this person. Not, I'm not in love with you. I don't have those
Well-
fluttery feelings, but I'm comfortable with you and I love you and I want to do for you
He's
and
going
I
to
want
address
your
that.
best.
And one of the backgrounds, if you guys wanted to get into this a little bit more, at least this letter, and so I give a whole bunch of quotes from it in the answers, but if you read his book, Four Loves, he talks about eros, which is what he describes as this feeling of being in love. This great. He also talks about phileo, which is your brotherly love with each other, and then he talks about agape, which, and then there's storge, which is another sense of family love. Phileo is like brotherly friends, friends. But he says, we get in this eros, this overwhelming sense of that's powerful, and he'll go through and he'll describe all these things, and you're like, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's obviously experienced it, because the descriptions that he makes, you're like, yep, if you've ever been there, you're like, oh, I can resonate with that, I can resonate with that. Okay, but then he'll say, once all that dies down, Christianity says it's time to love. You need to love your spouse, which is agape love, which is this self-sacrificing love, regardless sometimes of how it comes back on you. It's this dedicated. He says now again, like he said, now the real marriage begins.
Yeah, it's a choice.
It's the choice love,
yeah.
not this natural thing. And so when you're dating in the beginning, it's when we first started dating, it's like, oh, do you want to go shopping? Oh, I'd love to go shopping with you. Why? I just want to be with you, And then, add 10 years, you want to go shopping? No, I don't want to go shopping. Why would I want to go shopping? It's the most miserable thing ever. Or, hey, you want to come to the game with me? Oh, I'd love to go to the game with you, just so I can be with you. But then, again, add 10 years, like, I don't.
Do you want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and walk through the cotton fields and shoot birds?
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
But
yeah.
in the beginning,
You want to spend 10 hours walking through all these department stores? That's worse misery.
Yes.
The missing point too of what these guys are avoiding and not really addressing, and society for that matter is totally shelved, is the idea of shame, which was mentioned.
Oh yeah.
There is shame involved naturally for when we sin. I mean, Adam and Eve, the fallout of shame, and what the culture teaches, the sex edge, is shame is the bad thing. Just don't feel it. Stuff shame. But the second thing that's totally missing from the world's, presentation of sex is jealousy. The idea that there is that exclusivity that you want with that partner.
Yep.
And we're created in God's likeness, so we're jealous individuals just like He is. We don't have the right to be jealous like He does, but we certainly, when we're in a committed relationship, that powerful emotion of jealousy. I mean, basically, you could, crime of passion, right? I mean, you can kill your wife, stand before a judge, and get a slap on the hand because you caught your wife in bed with another man, and everybody understands that. They turn around and say, "Wow, we're
Look
going to
at
give
the
you a
things
less
that are
sentence."
done in the name
You
of
understand
love.
how powerful that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a powerful emotion, but that's totally disregarded in human experience as if it doesn't exist when it exists everywhere.
Yeah. Well, there's an inconsistent application of all that. Let's jump into 3 real quick so we can at least get one more. He says he switches topics just a hair, but he says the whole philosophy of hell rests on recognition of the axiom. What's an axiom? That's just a truth, right? On this well-known truth that one thing is not another, and especially the one self is not another self. My good is my good, and your good is yours. What one gains, another loses. Even an inanimate object is what it is by excluding all other objects from the space that it occupies. If it expands, it does so by thrusting other objects aside or by absorbing them. A self does the same. With beasts, the absorption takes the form of eating. For us, it means the sucking of will and freedom out of a weaker vessel, weaker self into a stronger. To be means to be in competition. Now, the enemy's philosophy is nothing more nor less than one continued attempt to evade this very obvious truth. He aims at contradiction. Things are to be many, yet somehow also one. The good of oneself is to be the good of another. This impossibility he calls love. And this same monotonous panacea is like a cure-all, this same monotonous cure-all can be detected under all he does and even all he is or claims to be. Thus, he is not content even himself to be a sheer arithmetical unity, he claims to be three as well as one, in order that this nonsense about love may find a foothold in his own nature. At the other end of the scale, he introduces into matter the obscene invention of the organism, in which the parts are perverted from their natural destiny of competition and made to cooperate. So, what's he saying here? This is kind of, he is still talking about love. And he's going to give us what he says is God's definition of love. But what Screwtape's trying to do is say that's impossible to be, because by nature, we're all autonomous, we're all independent. Therefore, if you and I become friends, and it's good for me, I'm going to be taking from you for my own good. Okay, that's this for him, for Screwtape, and I guess hell, is this idea of competition. That's going to be really, really important. What else jumps out at you in this couple paragraphs here? I asked some questions here, but how does this form of distinctionism and competition disagree with God's plans for us to be fulfilled? Question 4b.
I think even in the what was brought up earlier about like the feminist movement, us versus them, that's not how God sees it. He created us to be in union and to be cooperating, not competing. And so it's like those parts of a whole that if we're operating independently of each other, we lose some of the power and the beauty of what we were meant to do because we're independent. And so like the Screwtape's view of this obviously is that we are all consuming each other and trying to fill ourselves, where God's like, no, we contribute to each other. And that's, I mean, you see it in like marriages, in business, and all of this stuff. It's friendships, even like, what can you do for me? And it's interesting because it's Satan's foothold, and you see that he wanted to be as God in the very beginning, and that's why he fell. He didn't want to be a part of what God was doing. He wanted to actually be in opposition because he wanted the power.
And if he was going to do something good, if Satan was going to do something good, there's always an ulterior motive. And that's what he doesn't grasp, is that God is saying, when God says, oh, I'm going to love these people, well, what's your motive? What are you after? God says, I just want to bless them. No, that's not possible. And certainly you want something out of the deal. And obviously if you're going to love them and you're going to give to them, you're giving to them in order to get. That's Screwtape's mentality. You can't see anything else.
Well, I was just going to say the selfish nature of one person, then when you fart, that is always, you might say, to be receiving. But then when you start to cooperate, you get the joy of giving. And the joy of giving is something that most people as a selfish individual never would be aware of.
Yeah.
Do you ever try to give somebody something and they want to pay you for it?
Sure.
You know, I mean, and when you say, no, 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 I just want to give this to you.
I have a great way to manipulate them. It's Acts 20, verse 35.
Acts 20.
Yeah, write this down.
Okay,
Write
no,
this
I'm going
down.
to
What?
look it
Acts
up.
what?
Well, I can quote it
Acts
to you.
20.
It's Jesus said it's more blessed to give than receive.
Right.
So what I tell him is, I can't believe you're so selfish that you would take away my blessing. Because it's more blessed for me to give, and I'm giving this to you and I'm blessed, but yet you're going to take it away?
Right,
What are you going to do that
Well,
for?
that happens in a lot of instances. You know, you want to do something for somebody, and you'll say, and then that person says, oh, no, no, I can do this, or you're taking away their blessing.
You know, and I'll tell you, here's another one. Here's another layer you can throw on there. It's kind of fun.
What was
It's
it,
just
Acts
20,
25,
verse
what?
35.
5. It
It's
is more
one of these-
blessed to give than to receive.
It's more blessed to give than to receive. It's where it's never quoted in the gospel, so somehow he got it. But
Yeah, I was-
also you can tell them, you know what? If you want to pay me back, just give it to the church. I'm not interested. And you know what? They won't.
No.
Because they want to give it to you, you know? And if you just say, no, my blessing's there, and they most of the time will not go to do that, because whatever their motive was in trying to get some gain on you, I'm just trying to
That's
be really...
how I got one of my cats. Was somebody wanted, I
Oh, that's
wanted
a
to
good
pay
way.
somebody back, and they said, no, take that money and go rescue a cat.
Or, hey, it's more blessed to give than receive. I'm going to get a blessing here. I'm going to dump this on you. My cat that I don't want.
Oh, no,
That's
I
all.
had to go rescue one.
What about, people that fight over the bill for the dinner? You know, someone says, I'd like to buy you dinner.
Mhm.
And then the other person says, oh no, I'm buying it. Got it.
Yep. I mean, to
That
me,
goes on all
you don't
the
know what people's motives are, but nevertheless, it's like, okay. But there is a sense, Jesus did say, it's true, it's more blessed to give. There is a blessing
Right.
that people get.
But is
Some
that what
people
we're
get
after?
really suspicious of, well, what's your motive?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be indebted to you, and I don't want to.
Can't you just understand I want to give it to
That's
you?
the way certain people live.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about foot
Exactly.
massages.
Talk about what?
Foot massages.
Oh.
Oh,
Like, Mondo and I both have
yeah,
wives
we're
who love
washing
foot
somebody's
massage.
feet,
Oh,
yeah.
yes, that's true.
And what do I, when I give the wife a foot massage, and lately it's been almost every single night, I'm giving her a foot massage.
She sits down and puts the feet up in front of you like this.
Yep, exactly.
Hints.
And
That's her
this
hint.
is- and your feet hurt, she's complaining about her feet, and this, that, and the other, and I don't have a lot of gain. I can't quite see the end game for me. I'm thinking about it. Other than the fact, usually
Your
10 minutes
crowns
later
in
she's
heaven,
asleep.
crowns
Once
in
she gets her
heaven.
foot massage, then it's almost like a sedative. If I want her to go to bed, like, hey, I'm going to massage your feet. I'll go read a book. It's like giving her pills.
Oh, let me rub
But
your
it's just
feet,
something you
honey.
do, right? It's just, it's hard to balance everything with gain,
Yeah.
But it should, in this sense right here, when it says, one gains, another loses.
Yeah.
That there is this trade-off, but you don't really think of losing. I mean, I have to give up losing my time that I give a foot massage. I can't hang on to that. I'll just be bitter.
Yeah.
Never want to do it. It'll be bad for a relationship. So you have to just change your attitude. You can't think of it as a loss if you're in marriage.
Right.
You have to just say, time for the foot massage. Here you go.
And
That's
that's
of intimacy too. Intimacy too.
well, it is intimacy.
Yeah.
Because you're being touched.
Obviously, not just any man can go give Jackie a foot massage, right? You probably wouldn't.
Oh
like
no.
that. So there is
My
a.
feet.
Right. That's right. There's your feet. So as we close here, what we're going to be seeing is he's going to develop a little bit later this idea of giving. Truly is a way of blessing and not. It doesn't. The giving doesn't take away from you. The more you give, the more actually you end up receiving and being a mutually beneficial situation. Where Screwtape says, no. If you give, they're taking from you, they're stealing from you, they're robbing from you. And that's what he's after. Their philosophy is that way. But we know that God is not like that. And love, by definition, gives, right? God so loved the world, he gave. I mean, just using that. Love, by definition, gives. And therefore, it creates a mutually recurring situation. And he talks about the Trinity here. We won't have time to
And
get
there's
into
an
that.
order, and there's expectations, godly expectation and order. Bob was talking about jealousy,
Yeah.
and I don't know if this is being projected as to secular or if this is an attack on Christians. But our armor, our strength is the knowledge our strength is the knowledge that God gives us pertaining to life and godliness, and sex is not sex. It's a covenant.
Yeah.
It's a picture of something holy and spiritual, and you think of how the conditions he laid down to worship him and come into his holy temple, and who could go into the Holy of Holies,
Yeah.
and what that produced. It produced life. And these are the things we were supposed to keep our minds on, not look for some avenue to get off on things that are secular or that are dirty or that are tainted, but we're to look to him and be radiant and purified and also fear him, that we would keep our vessels clean and that we would honor our husbands and our God and keep our that spiritual perspective. Otherwise, we just get dumbed down and tempted, and that's Satan's strategy.
Well, it's amazing how I think even as Christians, we don't think we don't often think of physical intimacy as being a spiritual endeavor. We just make something physical that happens, you know. And by doing that, we're secularizing it in that sense. Well, let's pray and then we'll wrap it up here. Father, we thank you for, again, a good topic of discussion, and it is something that, again, most of us are, you know, we're all relational in that sense, and it's not just simply about being in love between a husband and wife, but as he gets broader here in the next few paragraphs, just talking about love in relationships at all, because love, by definition, requires at least two people, and it's a mutual thing. It's something that there's an interaction there, and there's a giving of from one to another, and then reciprocated. So we ask for your wisdom and blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.